it's not just through music. You can experience God in doing an art piece and like, oh man, this rainbow a little different right now. I don't know. This is different for me. So.
What am I making you?
What are you making?
What do you want to drink? What would you like to drink?
I see you got a little.
I got some syrup action going on. There's caramel. There's hazelnut.
Ooh.
Okay.
Run that hazelnut for me
I got you.
time.
I got you.
I like that.
Tell me about this song real quick. When was the first time you heard it?
Holy cow. This was the first beat I ever heard of J Dilla's back in, what was it, 2007, early YouTube days? This was the introduction for music for me. This is what did it.
How do you find it?
So, crazy story. I remember my dad was like heavy into gospel bands back in like the early, like the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
And one of the bands was named Ty Tribbett and GA. But what I didn't know is that the bass player was the name J Deal. And so we didn't know if it was J Deal or not. We were like looking up, all right, is it JD? And so we looked up JD, like JAYDEE, and that was the first track that popped up on YouTube's search engine at that time.
Okay.
And so we clicked on it and we were like, oh shoot, that's the same guy. But then we started looking up information and we were like, no, this isn't the same guy. But like, we all like started finding out like, oh, he passed away like 2 years prior, a year prior, because of lupus.
Yeah.
So we're like, I don't know if this is the same guy, but it's having the same effect as when we first heard J Deal, the bass player, as well as JD, the producer. And I didn't even realize Ty Tribbett and GA was one part in that Electric Lady Studios thing when I think Common created the album called Electric Circus.
Yeah.
So he actually pops up, Ty Tribbett, his face pops up on the Electric Circus album cover.
Did?
Yeah, I didn't even know that until
until
after I like looked up who JD was and like, oh dang, so everybody is low key in the same music stratosphere.
They're all connected.
Yeah.
What else were you listening to growing up?
I used to listen to, I grew up in a very strict Christian household at the time. And so I used to listen to anything the video games had. So NBA 2K 4, 5, and 6 all had like these really clean versions of hip hop records.
Yeah.
And also at the time, Tony Hawk Underground had by far one of the greatest soundtracks for a video game.
Yeah.
And I would just start playing and listen to the soundtrack. On top of that, my sister was heavy into, I forgot what the name of the rock group was, but they made that one song called I Try So Hard.
I'm hip.
Yeah. So, I used to listen to basically a whole giant amount of things, Depeche Mode all the way to gospel music of the early 2000s.
You were big into Flying Lotus as well, right?
That is literally one of the guys that helped me figure out my identity at one point. Like when I was trying to figure out like what is this weirdness I'm hearing, one guy was doing that at a high level, and it just so happened that Flying Lotus came out with Los Angeles at that time, and everybody was like comparing them to like the same emotion that Dilla would put into his music. Flying Lotus was the same guy, so I'm like, where can I find more of this stuff? And then I started listening to Flying Lotus, and that put me on the brain feeder, and then I started learning about Stone's Throws.
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole way.
It gets into the pigeonhole, because especially those guys are connected. So one thing, coming from a huge Fly Low fan myself, one thing Flying Lotus taught me, and the same thing with Dilla, is that if you can find a sound on an EQ, if it has a frequency, you can put it in a beat. So it changed the way of like how we saw what sounds were acceptable and like showed you how malleable music really is. What I wanted to ask you, did listening to Dilla and Flying Lotus kind of change your palette and the sounds that you pick because of that?
Yeah, It not only like changed my palette, but I went through a phase early on in high school where if it wasn't Flying Lotus or Dilla, I thought it was whack. Like genuinely, just because I was like a diehard, like, nah, man, it ain't Dilla, it ain't got that bounce on it. And what's crazy is I missed out on a lot of years of music, like just
of the mainstream music.
Of mainstream music because of that. Way. And so
I forgot what came out at the time. I think. Not headlines. What was the biggest Drake song in 2011?
2011?
With DJ Khaled. You know what I'm talking about.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
I'm on one. I think that was 2011, I think. Yeah. So all my friends would be playing that. I'm like, yo, this is tight, but like, yo, have you heard Zodiac shit by Flylo?
Yeah.
You hearing that?
I like high school me literally thought that was like, if that's the closest thing to like seeing heaven. Like just hearing that kind of sound design at that time early on, and like, you know, no one was really explaining how to make that sound unless you like listen to it a lot. And so that's what like I think curated my taste for things, as well as meeting a bunch of other people that were into the same thing. We all thought like if it wasn't Flying Lotus or Dilla or anything Brainfield related, it wasn't that cool.
Exactly. Let me ask you this. So, random question, but you were a catering specialist, right?
I was a catering specialist. Yeah.
Because with beats like Flying Lotus and Dilla, right? So Dilla has the power of filling in space by taking like weird parts of the sample, pulling on eighth notes and just looping it, right?
Yeah.
Flying Lotus uses a lot of the Foley, like, oh shit, you can use glass in a beat, like that's just allowed.
Yeah.
But kind of like, correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of like catering food, when you're putting a plate together, it's all about rations and portions. So
yeah.
Even though there are sounds that are acceptable, every sound is acceptable put in the beat, you gotta figure out how to place it. So for you, because I think you had like on Swim, that beat, your drum pack, you have like a mouth pop. Like no, that was a kiss, what am I saying? But like, I don't know why I'm kissing the air, but you had literally a mouth pop.
Yeah.
So you understand how malleable the world is around you. What I wanted to ask was, at what point do you stop and you're like, okay, this is too many sounds?
So there was a point that began this whole less is more thing for me. I started getting deeper into Flying Lotus's like discography, and I started noticing the more he made music, the less sounds he was using, but they were still very effective.
Yeah.
Like comparing Cosmogramma to something like Until the Quiet Comes.
That's one of my pause. Until the Quiet Comes is literally like one of the first albums I listened to, and like I was like, there's no words, but I feel this.
Yeah. Literally Until the Quiet Comes. And I also came across, at that time, he was still early in his career, I guess, like breaking into this new area of a lot of people knowing about his music, but James Blake. Yes. He originally was like in that producer field for a while. And I just thought he was really dope to be only using like 5 sounds and stretching those 5 sounds to as far as they can go. And I was like, dang, I want to be able to do that with my music. Because I remember I ended up having to do a show. I think I did a set or something, and I put like the whole set together and I was playing my music. And I realized I have an ability to be able to like blend all these sounds together, but I realized you can really give too much energy so early on into a song if you're giving all these sounds in the first 5 seconds.
Absolutely.
You can overwhelm people like that. And so I was like, I don't want to overwhelm the person I'm trying to like, you know, help. I'm trying to like help inspire people with my music. I don't want to like overly whelm them with so many sounds. So I was like, all right, what is something that like some of the premier executive composers and people do? And I remember watching this documentary about how Prince made Purple Rain. And he talked about how he built someone had said he built up this entire album, like the song top to bottom.
Yeah.
And he started taking away all these bits and pieces that made the song as great as it is. But that means Purple Rain was completely stacked full of all these instruments, all these different sounds. But what made it its perfect, like, I guess, structure of a song was that he started taking out the pieces of what was not necessary and saw the parts that were shining the most. And so that gave me a new idea of like, all right, what if I just only leave what matters or only play what matters?
Yeah.
Like being a musician, and that's how I like approach all my music. I like to look at music in a way of like, what does it need and what does it not need? So
there's always an overkill.
Yeah, there's always an overkill. You can really do too much.
You are from Florida, right?
I am.
Born and raised?
I am born and raised in Lakeland. Well, I was born in Brandon, but I was raised in Lakeland, Florida.
All right.
And then I ended up going to school, like college, in Orlando. So that's like the premier Florida swing for me.
Oh man, so you've been like, yeah, all over kind of Florida.
Yeah.
The Florida sound is kind of, it's kind of different to what you make. A lot different, like the mainstream sound, at least. Growing up, because I know you came from like a church background, which I want to get into later, but like growing up, did the fact that the music that you were making, as it wasn't as acceptable in the mainstream, because I'm assuming everyone around you was listening to different things, did that force the experimentation more to be like, no, okay, like you might not get this, but let me make something that you will, like you're at least gonna have a reaction to?
So it was a combination of a few things. I think what started it for me was that I was in a very unique space discovering music as a kid growing up, because like I grew up playing drums in church.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I know music by the ability of playing with people. And so I wanted to have a band early in middle school. Like I was like, if there any way we can create what I heard from Flying Lotus's record with like 4 other people, it'd be beautiful. I remember I had a couple homies at the time that were like, yeah, it'd be cool, you know, we could just come over to your crib, and they're all like neighbors and stuff.
Yeah.
But it didn't really like stick, like having a band. So I remember I was like, why don't I try and play these parts I'm hearing? Like, why don't I just play what I'm hearing in my head? And that's what turned into music production. Because my dad introduced it to me when I was super little. Like
on FL, right?
Yeah, on FL. Yeah.
And then you betrayed us and went to Ableton.
Yeah. Straight into loop sequencing and such. And so because I couldn't have a band, I went and started like trying to force playing like keys and stuff, even though I didn't know how to play piano. I only knew how to play drums, and I only knew how to drum.
Yeah.
And then I think coming across J Deal and accidentally coming across JD was what opened up a whole different world, where it was like, oh, you can actually curate some emotion, but by just producing a track.
Bro, the beat to Don't Cry, like that's a perfect example of that. Like I can't even lie, like that has gotten me emotional like numerous times.
Yeah.
Going back to growing up, so like I said, you were in the church, right? You grew up in the church.
I grew up, yeah.
So that's kind of like, so I'm Muslim, but I grew up, and still relatively, in like a pretty religious practicing family.
Yeah.
You said something, again, this might be my ignorance just because I don't know. You said something in an interview that I thought was really interesting. You said when you guys are playing in church that, oh, when God's moving and the music gets louder, something to that effect.
Yeah.
Can you like, what do you mean by when like God's moving?
So, and it's funny we're talking about this because this whole trip has been on this, like my whole LA trip recent, like this month has been like on this wave, but I'm realizing everybody has a supposed gift, an ability.
Absolutely.
Whether it be music or whether it be anything else. But like, especially when it comes to musicianship, I grew up knowing that I was not at church for me. Even though I was like, you know, I'm trying to like, you know, become closer to God with my ability, but also you're giving your gift back. It's like a service. And so when it comes to playing music, music is one of those things where, especially in church, it's one of those things where if you set up an atmosphere for cool things to happen, really cool things can transpire. whether it be in church, whether it be in a concert, whether it be anywhere. And so I remember quite amazingly 4 months ago, actually, a church that I go to, my church pastor, Martha Menizzi, ended up recording a record in 30 days. They had ideas for songs kind of pop up within a week, and because originally they were only going to do one song, and then that was going to be it. But one song turned to, what if we do this? Yeah. Oh, we got one. Oh, we got about 8 songs now.
It's
so
like
now,
over here.
yeah. And so they had all the pieces. They had one of my premier friends come and produce the whole record, and I remember coming in to listen to the record recording, and everybody had a special ability. But it was really cool seeing how, when I guess everybody was like, we're just forgetting about us for right now. We're trying to like give our gift back. It was the most insane recording I've ever witnessed. It was like, you know how music makes you physically feel things?
Yeah.
It like, at one point during the recording, it felt like the room was floating. And I'm like, how in the world do you do that with just...
This is the energy in the room.
It was the energy in the room. And I just remember I got so emotional. I was like, I need to go to the back because I'm a little emotional right now. I don't know if I can take all this. Because it wasn't just the musicianship being on fire. It wasn't the vocalist just being on fire. It wasn't just Pastor Martha going crazy. It was like everybody was in tune to what the main message was, which was to lift God up.
Yeah.
And so when that was the main premise, really, really cool stuff happened with the music. It felt like everybody was floating. Everybody got emotional. It was like...
I'm not even Christian. I kind of want to experience that. I just want to sit in the room, bro.
Oh, man. It was... And every once in a while, I think, persevering as a creative, you'll experience these things where you have really pristine ideas. It could be through music, like that, going to a concert setting, or you can be creatively sitting at home and you're just like, I have a really cool idea for something.
Yeah.
And then you manifest that thing over and over and over again, and all of a sudden you have a whole body of work. That has been a huge theme for the last 2 years now. And seeing it happen with somebody else, that my church pastor, I'm like, dang. What?
That's crazy. But it's funny, like, I hate to think that I have like a transactional relationship with God. Yeah. Because I'm always trying to practice, but as of recently, I really learned personally like the power of prayer.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think, like, for me, manifestation is really just praying. It really is just praying, just like God moving through your words, and kind of like how God is like, for me personally, I might have like a little more spiritual interpretation than like other Muslims, but like, I think God's in this room. I think God's in this cup. I think God is in this conversation. I think God is in sounds. Like, I don't think God is just like, I don't think God's like just this dude.
Single thing.
Yeah, I don't think he's just a dude in the sky that just like a naughty or nice list. That like, like, you're going to bad places. I feel like God's also in charge of like why birds chirp the way they do, or like just like, even how you hit a snare. Like, that's God. So what I found interesting was you mentioned that you had to hide the secular music from your parents.
Yeah, I did.
How would you define secular music if God's kind of like in everything?
And it's a very unique thing you put it that way, because growing up, it was, I guess for me, I grew up listening to a lot of instrumental music.
Okay, yeah, me too.
And so my musical palette was everything dealing with smooth jazz. Lakeland, Florida used to have, and I won't single it just out to Lakeland, Florida. I think the Central Florida at one point had a radio station called WSJT 94.1 Smooth Jazz. And what they would do is they would take really well-known songs at that time, I guess, at the time of pop radio and the crossover with jazz music in the 70s all the way up to the 90s. You know how they had like, what was it, Kenny G that would play the clarinet?
Yeah.
And so, they would have someone come in and play sax on all these big hit records, but it was never the words. It was always the sax indicating the emotion of the song.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it did for me personally, but like it changed the way I viewed music. I was like, dang, you could play a solo on a saxophone or clarinet and make that bad boy bounce. You can make somebody feel something. So because of that, I only knew music from an instrumental standpoint. I didn't know anything about words. Even still now, I'll be in sessions with artists and I don't know how to be able to like integrate like a word into the song. Maybe it'll pop up in the conversation, but like musically, I think in melodies and chords and drums. And so trying to convince my parents like what I'm doing it wasn't necessarily like quote unquote secular. They just thought it wasn't secular because it didn't say Jesus in it.
I went through the same thing. Like growing up, like when I was growing up, we were only playing like, and I feel like, I mean, it's no one's at fault, but like, I feel like I personally, like, I got left out of a lot of things that were growing up because people talking about like, oh, I grew up on Michael Jackson, blah, blah, blah. And my dad did play Michael Jackson, like Phil Collins, like from time to time. But I really just grew up listening to like, if there was not like any Islamic terminology in it, then it was not being played.
Yeah, and I think that I guess set up for the secular and the sacred. It can get really confused if you take away like, if you're not involving the intention of the matter, what's going on.
Exactly.
Like,
I like that.
Like, I think like, you know, if what you're trying to get people to experience is like, for people to be inspired or for people to experience God in a higher way. There's many ways to experience that. It's not just through music. You can experience God in doing an art piece and like, oh man, this rainbow a little different right now. I don't know. This is different for me. So, but yeah, you can, you know, especially growing up in that space, you can really get singled out to only know one way, you know, and
because that's all they know.
Yeah, if one way is all you know, then that's where you'll preach. You practice what you preach. Everybody, like, what was it? You practice what you preach, you are what you eat. You know, it's that same thing, like, you know. So I think my dad was always open to what I was doing. I just think I don't think he got it at that moment. I think my mom was just trying to make sure that I was like a healthy child, not deprived. I know. And so they just wanted to make sure I was cool, and I didn't think like, you know, you could just play a simple chord and that would change someone's life.
Did you feel any pushback of like when you were trying, because we already defined like what we view secular and non-secular, so we could both agree that God's in everything in all sounds. Now, explaining that to your parents, I could only assume came with like years of pushbacks. Like, how did you get over that?
So I have a relatively clean palette when it comes to like the type of, not just music I take in, but the type of entertainment I try to take in. Even on my Twitter, you know, Twitter is a dirty place sometimes.
Oh my God, bro. I couldn't get on Twitter during Ramadan.
Oh man.
Absolutely, I couldn't.
I did this thing during COVID where I was like, let me Google every single possible bad word you could think of, and I was just gonna put that in the filter of like, don't show these words
on my that though. You're controlling what you see.
Yeah, so everything I see on my profile is either Count Cole's videos, a homie of mine's beat videos, or someone like promoting art or video. And that palette, I've grown up on that palette for years. Like I've learned like, you know, I don't judge anybody who swears, cusses. That's that.
I was about to say, from all your videos and all the interviews that I've ever watched of you, and now sitting in front of you, I have not heard you curse.
Yeah, because like I genuinely think you can do the same thing. Like, what was it? Oh man, I'm thinking about it right now. There's an artist in Orlando, and I'm forgetting her name. And if it pops up in my head, I'll probably say her name like at the end of the interview. But she talked about how like nowadays in the human language, like the normal, you know, English language, we only use about 170,000 words just in conversation, and even in music, probably lesser than that.
Yeah.
So the amount of English words that are in the human dictionary, like, we got a lot of words. We got way more than 170,000 words to use. So it's like, you know, opening up the palette to kind of like give some clarity on what you're trying to say. Like, I'm trying to like, you know, eventually at some point, I know, not saying in 10 years I'm gonna have kids, but like, let's say 10 years from now, I would love to play like my kids like, yo, let me show you what I was doing like back in 2021, 2020. And so
have
like
something for them to admire.
Yeah, and that was the craziest thing about doing this, the whole Lupe Fiasco thing, was because I came across so many parents that were like, finally, hip hop I can play for my kids.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool because I'm like, dang, kids really don't be bumping like hip hop around their parents. Like, you know, someone always has like a video of their parent reacting to like so-and-so song on TikTok.
I always see that.
And I'm like, dang, that's real. Like growing up, I couldn't play nothing like that with my mom. My mom be like,
oh, me either, yeah.
What are you playing?
So how you grew up definitely had an effect on the music that you make now.
Yeah.
Or the way that like you interact now.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So preface, I recently got into production like in like when COVID started basically, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, I've always known music, like we said, like exerting a feeling.
Yeah.
I love sampling, love all that. For me, personally, I feel like a lot of people get caught up in this is like, at what point do you sacrifice like the music theory of things and just go off feeling? Because it's like, you want to exert a certain feeling on a song, but then you're like, oh man, is there enough tension in these chords? Are these resolved? Or like what time signatures in these drums? And I feel like a lot of producers struggle with that because they feel like they need to know all this theory. But then you hear like all the greats, like a Flying Lotus, where like he's literally all about breaking the rules.
Yeah.
And like a Dilla, like all about breaking the rules. Like, oh, you can play drums like this? Like his kicks sound like
someone's punching.
Not even. It's like you half asleep and they're just like, you're just doing this. And you're like, oh, but this is allowed. But if you look at it from like a music theory lens, probably back then, it was probably telling him like, oh, what you doing? So what I wanted to ask you as like a multi-instrumentalist yourself, at what point, or if ever, like do you not even think about the theory and just let sounds from the soul come out?
All right, how can I answer this? Because this is one big thing that I think can hinder either musicians, not even just with music, but art. It can hinder your growth if you perceive that you have to know a theory. And I'll go ahead and destroy this myth. It's one of those unique things where like I used to think I needed to know how to play a piano in order to be able to convey what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
But then I realized I had a piano class in high school, and I remember growing up in church, my dad would play he would lay his hands on the fingers, but he would play a very distinct chord, and it was the 3 black keys, the 1 white key on the bottom. I think that's like E or F.
Yeah.
And he would have his pinky on the first black key that hits on the 2 part. So he would lay his hands on that, and he would play that chord. So vling, and he would put an octave on the above key on the bottom. I remember he would just play it, that chord, specifically on the piano. Why he played that chord, I don't know why, but the feeling that came out of that chord was so much to be able to convey what he was trying to say.
Yeah.
And so I used to think music theory was learning all these different intricate scales or anything like that, but a homie of mine said it best, and this is what changed my whole perspective when it comes to music theory. Music theory is just as deep as what you know from music.
Oh, you can let that breathe.
Yeah. And so you don't have to know all the scales to music. You just have to know music, which if you listen to music or if you listen to any kind of your favorite music, what you know is your theory.
I like that.
Yeah. So like,
I like that.
Let's say if your thing is to sample tracks and you know how to sample beats, you have already defeated 75% of what people are trying to learn when they're playing the piano. There's people who learn how to play the piano and they know how to play like, Bach, Chopin.
Yeah.
But like as far as the ear to hear stuff, that's the hard part.
That is something that I feel like myself and a lot of producers struggle with in terms of like, oh, am I doing too much? Boom, boom, boom. Like, here's how I rationalized it, and correct me if I'm wrong. You can kill the keys. You can be like insane with the keys, but the truth also holds that you can play the keys crazy, but also be a terrible music producer. Because at the end of the day, it's like if you don't have an ear for like, okay, how should I process these drums? Do I want to make them warm? Do I need to make them polished? Oh, how am I going to filter out the sample in the back? How much reverb? What stereo? I think personally, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's what makes a producer. This thing.
Yeah.
But also, coming with the ear for music, I feel like a lot of people get discouraged when, let's say, they hear their tracks and it's not coming out the way they think.
They think, yeah. So
it's like, it's one thing for me to be like, all right, I know exactly how these drums, I want them to sound. But then when I put it like whatever program and it's not coming out the same way that I want it to come out, that's discouraging. But that doesn't mean that you don't have a good ear. It's just the technical skill hasn't been translated yet. So I wanted to kind of ask you, have you reached the point where if you have an idea in your head, you can translate it? Or is that just like an ongoing process as you learn more music?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's like, let's say, for instance, one thing I had to take from my experience of trying to make music was getting out of what I want it to sound like. Because let's say if you make a lot of music, right?
Yeah.
And you've listened to a lot of music.
Yeah.
Most of the time when you look up like videos on how those producers or composers made such and such big hit record, they're always like, man, I just put the sample on top of this and it happened. And it's like, well, why did it happen? How did that process occur?
Yeah.
And it's really easy. They got out of the way of the music. When you get out of the way of what you want it to sound like and allow the music to kind of speak for itself, then it kind of opens up a whole broad range of things. Lately for me, it's been working where like I have a concept for something that I wanted to like arrange a certain way.
Yeah.
Like, because I'll have like originally I used to make beats and loops. That's the reason my beat videos are so short, because I used to make a lot of beats that are only 30 seconds long.
Yeah.
And I would send them off to people. And they'll be really mad at me because they're like, yo, this beat is only 30 seconds long.
I need
more to write over it. And so I was like looking at that whole perspective, because like I used to really want my music to sound like this sound.
Yeah.
But when you listen to the music that you've listened to, if you feel music, you'll exceed your expectations as far as what you want it to sound like. It's like, all right, I got the drum pattern. Now, how can I do my thing to it? How can I like
add my own
little thing to it? Yeah, because growing up in church, it was like you would have people sing, but everybody who's ever like witnessed like a gospel church, they'll have crazy people who could play crazy chords.
Yeah.
And my dad always used to be so laid back on the keys. He wouldn't play the fancy chords. He would play the simplistic, easy, and only throw those chords in when it was necessary. Like, let's say if someone's singing a song, they'll go back into the hook.
Yeah.
And he'll find a chord that'll go right back into the hook. But it was always an explanation for something. He just didn't do it just because he wanted to do it. He did it because the music was telling him, oh, we need to go back now.
Yeah.
And so he was like, all right, keep it simple, go back. Even drummers. Like, how many drummers have you come across online that spaz out, but then you see them in a concert setting playing for an artist, and you can't just spaz out with the artist. You
have to follow the tempo. There's a guideline you got to follow.
And that is exactly the same way it works when it comes to production. The exact same way.
I've never thought of it like that.
And because instead of you controlling it, you allow the music to kind of speak for you. That's why sometimes you hear certain beats that like hit, but they only got like 5 sounds.
Yeah.
That means whoever was in the room with the people, they were like, ugh, take that out. Like Kanye West.
I was waiting to bring that up.
Yeah.
I was waiting, like, whenever I feel like that, like, oh, I'm not that good at the keys, I always remember, like, Kanye does not know how to play the piano, but his string, he knows which people to bring in.
He knows the pieces. Yeah.
Exactly. And something that trips me out, like, and it's hard, like, not to get goosebumps when you think of it. Bro, what did Dilla have? He had an MPC,
MPC,
a Juno, What else? That was it?
He had the Rhodes.
Rhodes. Oh, yeah, Rhodes.
And lots of records.
But yeah, that comes with the ear.
The ear, yeah.
But equipment-wise, it was just the MPC.
Yeah.
Bro, if Dilla had what we had right now, he would have ate everyone's lunch.
Honestly, after hearing about some of the things he did with this MPC machine before they updated it. Before they updated it.
But this is like the old school MPC
old school joint, yeah.
Where you had to put like the floppy disk in.
And on top of that, the drums, and no one ever talks about how like Questlove is like half of the drum, like half of, no, not even half. Majority of R&B and hip hop drum samples, 9 times out of 10 have been recorded at Electric Lady Studios with Questlove.
Really?
Yeah, like what was it? I can name maybe, let's say about 4 records that I know have used the infamous Questlove collate clap. It sounds like like
actually.
Easy by Mac Ayers.
Yeah.
That's Questlove's collate clap. Like, and everything comes from the Voodoo record. Like you could sample those drums off of just one shot. There's so many parts in that album where the drums are just open and people sampled Questlove's drums. Dilla did it all the time because he hung out with those guys. Like he was a part of the Soulquarians crew where he was just like, I like the way that kick hit. Can you throw that my way? I'm gonna chop this up.
Do you remember, I think it was on Twitter a few months ago, and like people were trying to get on, I think T.I. for like, oh, you stole the song. And I was like, oh, so you guys don't know what sampling is.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like a lot of producers might feel guilty about using, not guilty, but like self-conscious about using samples and they see all these other producers like, such as yourself, who can play the keys, who can also play the bass, who can also play their own drums. But I feel like what people don't realize is if you have a drum pack, like you do realize like those are samples.
Those are samples, yeah.
So what would you say to like upcoming producers that are kind of like self-conscious about sampling too much?
Do whatever you want, man. Honestly.
Just don't overthink it.
Don't overthink it. Hip hop is originated off of like
drum breaks.
Drum breaks. So at some point, someone was gonna be like, let's break down the drum break.
Yeah.
Let's take this drum and put this drum on this drum. All of a sudden, you got people being like, oh, well, if they can record that, let's go and record it like they did.
Yeah.
So now you've gotten from sampling a whole record to breaking down a record to legit milliseconds digitally and being like, how can we achieve that sound again? And you see, and now I think it's going to be a new thing where everybody's trying to re-emulate the stuff we all enjoy. Like,
oh, absolutely.
I mean, like,
absolutely. How many Dilla type beats do you hear these days, or Flying Lotus type beats?
There's a lot. There's so many, and I think the only ones that I think will be able to really stand out are the ones that like connect with what they're doing. AKA, if you're being the one to be like, all right, we're gonna curate this sound to make it sound like what it was in this time. And I mean, I've come across a lot of people trying to re-emulate that Dilla-like sound by like trying to make the kick sound a certain way, but the only person that can do Dilla is Dilla. So do you, but that's where it comes from, but just do your thing on top of it.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a cycle of like inspiration that like the Dillos gave birth to the Flylos and the Flylos and the Madlibs, and they kind of gave birth to like a whole generation
of people,
of just like producers, which is why I think it's like people like you, Monty, The Count, Kenny Beats, the list can go on of like all these originators in the music sphere that like not only have their own originality, but like you guys are like really transparent in like how your music comes together. Like you're not afraid to like share the sauce. You know?
Yeah.
When growing up, because the producer community wasn't always like this.
It wasn't. Oh, it wasn't.
You grew up in like, you really came off in the SoundCloud era, but not like, people think of the SoundCloud era as like Ski Mask, Lil Pump, all that. But you were like on the other spectrum of like the
late YouTube SoundCloud.
Yeah, exactly. Making like the Miley Cyrus remixes and whatnot.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, because for someone who gives so much back to the community right now, did that come from you not getting much growing up and like having to learn it your own and be like, all right, I don't want like all you guys to suffer. Let me just share that. How would you put it?
So it's actually funny. I was just talking to my friend about this on the way over here. But we were talking about like Kaytranada
GOAT.
That is,
period.
I'll go and say that is like, he's basically one of the reasons I even continue to keep doing music, because I was just a high school kid thinking that music was not a reachable task in the city where I was from. Mind you, he was in a very similar place.
He was in Montreal, right?
Montreal.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people come
They
out
used to laugh at him after the sessions. Like, I remember reading the story where like they went to a restaurant and like after like a studio session, and he was like, I want to take this shit seriously, and they all kind of laughed at him.
Yeah,
I forgot where I read that from.
Yeah, so I think I know exactly what magazine you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I remember, I remember like, just to kind of give you the landscape of it, when I was in middle school, I came across Flying Lotus and Dilla, and I was like trying to like make this music. And I remember I had this opportunity to, show and tell in middle school.
Yeah.
Get to show people your music. And that's when I started finding out that acapellas were just sitting online in Google search engines. So you could go and find a blog spot. Like, remember Blogspot?
Yeah.
So people would upload like links of like whole acapellas to music and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I remixed a Millie from Lil Wayne. I don't know who put the acapella out on the internet, but I ripped it online, did a whole remix of it, and I played it for my middle school class. And it was my language arts class, and I'll never forget this. I remember I played it, and I only had 2 homies of mine that liked it, but the entire classroom hated it. They all was like, what is this trash?
Yeah.
What is this mess? And I remember being so low at that point. And the only homie at that time that was like breathing life into what I was doing was a Kaytranada.
Yeah.
I uploaded that same remix online, and he comments on it, like, and he was known as Kaytradamus at that time.
Yeah.
And so he was like, yo,
What was your name back then? Mr.
Mockwell.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had like 3 names. I went by Construct with a K, Mr. Mockwell, and then my dad was like, just use your name.
Stop.
Yeah. So,
Stop all this.
So
go on.
I remember Kaytranada, like, I would ask him like tips on how to get better at this thing in around 2010, 2011. I'm not really thinking much about it. I'm like getting better with, piecing these songs together. And he's starting to like upload these remixes on the SoundCloud and stuff. And he gave me the tip, like, bro, you already have what it takes. Just take a really well-known acapella and put it with a beat that you made and upload it. And I was like, all right, cool, I'm gonna try it. The first one I did it to was Getting There by Flying Lotus. And
bro, that song, that is the song that like, that was my introduction to Flying Lotus at the time.
Yeah.
This is gonna sound so weird. I literally remember, because I grew up overseas. I grew up in Qatar. Bro, I was literally like, I was 15 at the time. I was like riding my bike, like literally a desert. Like literally a desert. That's like where we lived. Like not even the stereotypical, like literally a desert. I remember riding my bike around, and like I came up with like a video treatment to that beat. And that was like, that's when I was talking about earlier that was like the first album. That song specifically was like, when I was like, there's nothing here, no words, but I feel this.
Yeah. And that was what did it for me. Like, I was like, all right, I can like, cause I had a way of like sampling at that time.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to play keys, but I knew how to like take a sample and manipulate it. And so at that time, and I think it might still be up on the internet, but I like recorded a video of me basically doing crazy random effects all over the whole remix. And I uploaded it to YouTube, and I uploaded it to SoundCloud. 3 days pass, it hits 5,000 plays. A month later passes, 10,000 plays on SoundCloud. This is the most attention I've ever garnished off of music before. And then Kate was like, I told you, it worked. And he was like, just keep doing it. So I was like, all right, great. Let's see what's the hottest song right now in the world. And remember Psy?
Yeah, yes.
Gentleman came out. And because I remember he had Gangnam Style, but then Gentleman came out right next after that.
Yeah.
And so that's when I was like, all right, I've been shunning this pop thing for a while. I've been really thinking it was not cool, but I was like, what if you take a pop record like Gentleman and put some dope trap beat drums on top of it? Trap was huge in the early 2010s, man. You throw an 808 and some hi-hat rolls and you got a...
That was it.
Man, I uploaded it and I didn't think it was going to explode the way it did, but Kaytranada started doing Boiler Room. and he played my remix.
Oh shit, I know that.
Yeah, he played it.
Oh my God.
He not only played that, but he played another joint called That Power Phone, which is I don't even have on my hard drive anymore. He played like tracks I don't even have.
Yeah.
And at that same time, I'm like messaging him through Facebook. I'm like, bro, like, how are you doing this? Da, da, da. He's like, man, I'm just creating great music and people are liking it. Like, if you're like, I guess that feeling he was feeling with the music, he just kept pushing it and playing in all of his sets.
Yeah.
And I guess as he was doing DJ sets, the more he did DJ sets, he was like, I want to play my shows like this. And then he was like, I want my records to sound like the records I want to play. And so every record now that he DJs in his sets, if you go back to like 2013, he's playing like classic disco.
Yeah.
Like classic, like mid-pump disco that has a little funk on it, a little bit of experimentation, but it's kind of like evolved into what he does now. And so I was like, dang, what if I could just do the same thing? And so I did that for a while, and that opened up a whole palette to where like, dang, SoundCloud is like open. This is like the new space for me to kind of express myself.
The wild, wild west almost.
Yeah.
It's crazy that you mentioned that, because that's something I wanted to, the next thing I want to bring up, that like, let me ask you this, do you believe in luck?
Do I believe in luck?
Yeah.
I think, what's the way to put it? Not necessarily luck, but I think when the timing and the moment arrives, then
exactly.
you have luck.
I personally think, yeah, the timing, the moment arrives. I think there's also a factor of like, you create that. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. You create that. The same way that you were uploading on SoundCloud and Kaytranada was telling you, keep this up, is the same way that you were uploading your beat videos and a Lupe goes across from it and sees that, and you end up doing an entire EP with him.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to ask, like, before we get too much in the details, so the beat videos didn't start till like, because I feel like that's myself included, that was my introduction to you, like those beat videos. That didn't start till like when, like February 2020? So
the short
ones, yeah.
The short ones started in February, but I had been doing beat videos on and off in 2018. Like I started like 2018 when I was like, all right, I'm gonna just put some content out there just to see what happens. And I was a catering specialist, had lost my job at that point, and I was doing Uber Eats and Postmates. So in the middle of me doing Uber Eats and Postmates, I would spend like a couple hours every day trying to make a beat off of random objects around the crib.
Yeah.
And so 2018, I had the first one where I was like, what if I made a beat off of ASMR sounds? Remember ASMR was really big at one point?
Yeah.
So I took those sounds, I don't know what video it was, but I recorded it, made a beat off of it, uploaded it on my Spotify, and I was like, dang, that's actually a pretty cool idea. What if I just start like making the beat and then uploading it straight there? That way, if someone wants to find the song, it's already online.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think much about it. I already had curated a thing for it, but no one had like, was really taking me seriously in that regard.
Yeah.
And so I was doing sessions around Orlando and everything, and then COVID comes across, I had to move back home, and that's when I was like, dang, I can't like really physically go and work a job because COVID shut everything down.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, what if I like try and push this music thing? And I remember at the beginning of 2019, I sold my first sound pack, volume 1, at like $5. But I remember I made $500 off of that.
Yeah.
Back in like 2019. And I was like, what if I fine tune all those sounds, add more, and then re-upload it? And I made even more.
Yeah.
And that actually paid my bills the first month of like quarantine. So
damn.
Yeah, and so the sounds that I'm using in those beats, I'm using the same sounds in the packs. So the videos in the packs, they correlate.
And the albums too, because you have like, correct me if I'm wrong, because what was Moments? You have the Moments album, and then the sound pack is called Fragments. So are those like, was that supposed to be connected? Like,
they're all, yeah.
I got that, yeah.
And it's funny because, you know how you said, when the moment and all that preparation comes together and creates luck, I did an album prior to that called It All Ends. No. And it did not do good. It didn't do that well.
The one in 2019?
Yeah.
Hold that thought. There's a beat that I need to play from you from that album specific. Well, my phone's on me right now. There's one beat that you made on that album Hold up.
Because that one was
This beat right here.
Oh, wow. Holy cow.
Bro, the chord progression on this is crazy. And then I heard the drums come in. I was like, oh my God. But yeah, go on, sorry.
Oh man, and it's funny that in preparation, look, that was actually made 3 years prior.
Really?
I worked on that album for like 6 years. And what was crazy is majority of that preparation was me trying to understand how to record instruments and implement it into what I was doing. And so that record was the combination of me learning how to play keys and actually like insinuate what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And on top of that, incorporate other musicians on top of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so when I uploaded it, I thought I like had one. I thought I had something really, really special on me. But what I realized was It All Ends wasn't the end. It was literally like the beginning for me to understand how to do what I'm doing now. So when moments occurred, I used all the information I learned creating all that music. And I remember I actually played it for the homie before like I extended it out and uploaded the DSPs. And he goes, what if this does better than your last project? Just kind of just throwing it out there. And I'm like, I don't really like to level my projects out because everything is special to me in that regard. But like, you know, if this short project does way better than my last project, that was literally 40 minutes long, it defeats the concept thinking that I have to create an hours long of work in order to convey my point. Yeah. And it changed everything. Like all my homies are like, yo, I didn't know you could make an album that's 13 minutes long. Yeah. And what's funny
is it's becoming more acceptable nowadays.
Right. And the first person who did this, because I have to give credit where credit's due, Tierra did it before everybody else did.
The 15-minute project. The 15-minute project. What was it called?
Whack World.
Whack World. And she did, bro. That was the most creative shit I've ever seen. It was 15 minutes, and it was a minute-long music video. Yeah. For each song. I've never seen something like that before. That was
what gave me the idea. Like, bro, you got beats, bro. And if the beat doesn't evolve, you can keep it a minute long. Dilla did it.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Dilla had 40-something deep on his beat tapes. And I'm like, dang it, a minute long. But imagine if you just like go all in on the musicianship for 1 minute. Yeah. No one's doing that. And I didn't think it was gonna be as well received as it did. But that like helped me understand how to be able to convey a point early.
Like, absolutely.
Like I get it now.
In terms of, so I'm not gonna ask you about the story about how the house with Lupe happened because I've heard it so much, I can tell you it. Yeah. But I think there's a point to be extracted from that entire story is that I think people see the cool beat videos from you, but social media, it's a blessing and a curse because we only see the completed product. Yeah. We don't see, the drafts don't get posted. So there's always this assumption that like, oh, like this was done on like, this was a first take thing. And like you start getting into the habit of like comparing yourself and like, whoa, what if I'm not good enough? This guy's pulling out like 5 different gears. I can't do that shit. So what I wanted to ask you, I'm 100% sure there's a lot of trial behind those beat videos. So I kind of wanted you to expound that like, it's really not just a take, it's a lot of trial and error. So if you could just expound on that, like how many takes does it actually do to get that decent beat video out?
So if I'm being honest, I'm not the best when it comes to keys. Keys are not my first.
They're not your first? They sound like they're your first.
What you're seeing in these short videos are at least me sitting there for an hour to just get it. Like there's beats where the chords are there, but I'll spend an hour, 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what the chords are. Like lately I haven't been, like beforehand it was easy because I was transposing. Yeah. But then like growing up in church, they always be like, man, don't let that transpose, learn the chords. Like actually learn the chords. Yeah. You won't have a transpose on a grand piano. Yeah. Like your transpose better be looking at the piano, knowing where to play. Yeah. And so I've been trying to challenge myself to actually play the piano now, and I'll come across a chord that'll be cool, but then as I'm recording the beat video, I'll be like, what if I try this? Ooh, that sounds cool. What if I go like, da-da-da? Ooh, what if I make this entire beat go bop, bop, boom, boom, chords. So it's literally trying out so many different things. It's basically sculpting as I'm going, playing.
Shout out drum sculptor.
Sculpting, just sculpting, yeah.
So it's like, because I feel like it's a really daunting thing for creatives that it's like, you almost not feel ashamed about the things that you like in public, but you're like embarrassed to because you don't know what's gonna happen or how it's gonna be received. And like, even you, that was valid at a certain point and still probably is now about some things. Well, I wanted to ask, like, what's your advice to creatives who kind of see themselves falling in that trap, or they're like, oh, I don't know if I should post this. Oh, I don't know what this is gonna do. Because like I said, you can create luck. And the luck that you created, you know, Lupe, I've seen you in a bunch of interesting studios here in LA that I guess I'll hear it when it comes out. So, but that all started from you kind of just putting it out there and trusting yourself. So what's your advice to creatives who kind of fall themselves in that trap?
So to any creatives that like are not sure if they should post something, honestly, maybe I could say from my viewpoint, I try to disassociate myself from my work. Especially when I create, I like to put out what the energy is and don't hold on to it. It's like, let that energy go. And if you're creating not for the intention of you, but for somebody else, you'll get inspiration more and more as you go along. And like me per se, I only watch my beat videos if I'm trying to fine tune what I'm doing. Like I'll watch a video and sometimes I'll be like, I could have played that better, but I didn't want to push myself to go farther than that. And so I live with the results of knowing that I did the best that I could and I'm giving it out there.
And letting it do its own thing.
Let it do its own thing. I get off social, I'll post it where it needs to go. I'll come back in an hour to see how it's doing, if anybody like hit me up to want to work or anything like that. And I'm on to the next thing. But I try not to hold on to this concept. Like, for instance, remember earlier we were talking about like, you know, trying to control your work and be like, I want it to sound like this. Well, you have to do the same way with the results.
That's key. And I think I personally forget that. I personally forget that because it's like, even if the results don't come the way that you think they're supposed to come, some pretty cool shit happens later down that you probably weren't expecting. And it's like, not to go off a tangent, but that's why, like, even for me, like, I've been kind of like, this for instance, like, the way that this transpired, I wasn't supposed to even be here. And then it came together. Because based off the results of my last trip out here, fucking disastrous. But then it always ends up folding out to something you didn't expect. And like, me personally, I don't know if you could attest to this. When you start praying for what's meant for you or working for what's meant for you, from like, whether you believe in a deity, God, the universe, once you start asking what's meant for you rather than what you think is supposed to happen to you, some pretty cool things happen.
Yeah, actually, I have a, because I used to, because it's very unique. I actually changed the way I pray now. I pray not for what I am wanting to happen, but I pray for whatever
is meant.
Whatever that will is, let that happen.
Because if you pray for what's meant, if you pray for what you want to happen, you're always just gonna be disappointed because there's a lot of things you can't calculate.
Exactly. Like literally the entire trip prior to COVID and then COVID, like the pandemic happening the way it did, I remember specifically asking God, like I was like, yo, if this is meant for me, give me some sort of inclination that I should continue on. If not, I'll do something else. I have no problem like walking away. Because like for many years prior to 2020, I thought about like completely giving up on music.
Really?
I really did. Like it got to a point where like I was doing these shows. I was trying to get paid for shows. And even still to this day, I'm owed a lot of money from like really awful business deals. So like I was like really contemplating like, is music something that I should be taking seriously? Is there something else I need to be putting my energy towards? And so, yeah, I really did contemplate like quitting at one point. But then I was like, God, if this is what you want me to do,
show me something.
Show me something.
Yeah.
And then that's when the pandemic happened. That's when I started embracing my biggest weakness at that point, which was playing the piano. I didn't really know how to play keys. And then the first video, I played, and I was like, what's the time signature? And that hit 250,000 views on Twitter.
Yeah.
What? Like
I remember seeing that, yeah. Oh my God.
And that was like the first inclination, like, you know what?
Maybe
I should keep doing this. And then everything kind of like evolved into its own thing. Now I'm like trying to craft I have a whole album based off of the first project.
Yeah.
Like just going back to that era and being like, what if I made it funky? And so it's based off of just, God, what's the idea here? What's the thing? And so the ideas are kind of like hitting me left and right. You know, I'm not really trying to force anything.
They're just coming.
I'll go for a run and all of a sudden, bam, 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 bam.
You'll hear it.
And I'll hear it. And I'm like, all right, what instrument does that? Or how can I like integrate this into what I'm doing? And it turns into something cool at the end of the night.
What's that? Don't force the funk?
Don't force the funk.
That's, I think something that a lot of people can take from that is like, there's a hustle environment on like, that's been created, like not even by social media, just how things are right now where it's like, you gotta work.
Yeah.
And then you leave no time for space.
Yeah.
But from my understanding, I mean, don't force the funks is like separate thing, but you're all about kind of stepping away. Like you don't always have to be like eyes glued to the computer.
Yeah.
Like people don't realize that's how you get burnt out. Like,
yeah.
And sometimes the best idea comes like when you just walk away from it. When did you learn how to like really give things space?
I say around June of 2020.
Okay.
When the Lupe project had occurred, I had just came out with Moments, and I was looking at everything from like a holistic view of like, dog, I did a lot this year and it's only been like 4 months.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, what is something I always wanted to do? And I started like realizing that music opened itself up to other things. So I was like, you know, I don't have to make a beat video today. Like
it's okay.
It's okay to not make a beat today.
Yeah.
Like you can listen to music. Like watch a film, watch something that you like.
And get inspired.
And get inspired from it. Yeah, because like I'll tell you, me and Count would be like, bro, I feel burnt out. You good, bro?
Yeah.
Man, I don't want to make another beat video right now. I don't want to think about that. Like even I texted him before I got here, and he's like going swimming somewhere, and he's like,
I saw he was like camping out.
Yeah, he's enjoying life right now.
Yeah, and he said something that like that made me think. He was saying something like he doesn't do music on the weekends.
Yeah,
he lives, and I feel like a lot of people like forget that aspect. That for you to even get better at the music, you have to go out and experience and translate that feeling into the music.
Yeah.
Now, real quick. Bro, I can sit in front of here and talk for like 4 hours. Yeah. But I want to talk about your sound design real quick, like Drum Sculptor, the sound packs. Did that come, like, did you know you want to get to sound design back then, or did that come as a necessity, as like another stream of revenue for being a producer?
It started for me when I realized I wanted to make things from scratch.
Yeah.
I like making things from like the very beginning. Because I guess if you make things from the very beginning, it's a little more genuine.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between you going to the store and getting a cake recipe versus, oh, what's the recipe for like actually making a cake?
Yeah.
It takes flour, it takes eggs, it takes this, it takes that. Then you're like, all right, I know how these ingredients work to be able to create this thing. And so after doing that for so many years, I understood like how, with music, how DAWs work. Like every DAW.
It's an instrument. It's literally an instrument.
Yeah, literally, like if you can work a DAW and understand how a DAW works, you can make it do or say anything.
Yeah.
And so I originally, it started where I was like, in church trying to make a drum set sound a certain way that I wanted to sound. So we used to have this really big thing, and this is like the last story I have.
Yeah.
But there used to be this thing when I would travel and play drums at different churches. Every drum set was different, or i.e. they didn't have a drum kit.
Yeah.
They had like a drum kit broken down in the corner, so you had to figure out a way to make that broken drum kit sound like the best drum kit you ever played.
Yeah.
So every single Sunday, my dad would be like, all right, so what's wrong with the snare? It sounds too low now. What do you want it to sound like? You want it to sound high? You want it to have like a high pop?
Yeah.
Okay, we cranking this bad boy until it goes all the way up. Then we got the kick drum. What does the kick drum need? You need a towel. Anybody got a jacket, a leather coat? Okay, throw a leather coat in the kick drum. All of a sudden, cool. I got cymbals in the car. We put it together. By the end of the service, someone will come over and be like, why does the drum sound so good? It sounds like you mic'd them and they aren't mic'd.
Yeah.
Like, what did you do? I was like, man, it was a lot of makeshift. And so
being malleable.
Yeah, and so drum sculpting came from the same concept. Like, I got tired of going online trying to find drum samples, and I don't know if you probably come across this, but a lot of drum samples sound very similar. I'm not gonna like say how
too similar.
Too similar, like
the snares in like four different
bags. Yeah. So it's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
You know. And so I was like, all right, why not make a tool just making your own drum sound? And on Ableton, it's cool because you could just print it. You could like literally have it synced up to an audio track, record that, and hit it.
Oh,
like
so you low-key making the case for Ableton now.
Personally, it's just, because like I didn't realize how deep Ableton goes unless because personally, I realized how convenient presets are.
Yeah.
But like if you know how to work a tool, you end up making your own presets, which is like, oh, you're already like thinking a little more ahead of the curve. Someone's getting their favorite synth from Omnisphere.
Yeah.
But you can make your own Omnisphere in Ableton. It's like they kind of set it up for you to go that deep, but nobody ever wants to go that far.
It's all presets. One of the last things I want to bring up is because, bro, that new MIDI keyboard that you have, it looks like it should defy gravity.
Oh, like all those colors?
Yeah. So like people see in the videos, and like a lot of producers, they get intimidated of seeing like all like these fancy gears. But what people don't realize is kind of like how we're talking about a Dilla, you didn't have much to start off with. You really didn't have much at all. So at what point do you feel like having too much gear kind of inhibits creativity? Because at that point, it's like, it's too many options. And what advice would you give to producers in terms of like trying to find the essential gear?
The moment it stops becoming about the music is when you should start looking at your gear.
I like that.
Yeah, because like I'll say the number one thing that can lead to creativity is being limited. When you're in a room that doesn't have a lot, you can start stretching your brain on how far one object in the room goes. Like, this chair can not only just be a chair, it could be a keyboard stand. Or if you, I don't know, put like another one on top of this, you can make two keyboard stands.
Yeah.
So it's like every tool has its thing to be able to be a little more, it can basically stunt your growth if what you're relying on is the brand new tool.
Yeah.
Sometimes looking at the tools you have around you can be the biggest eye opener. Because before the beat videos happened for me, I've been using the same MIDI keyboard since I was little. I haven't changed any new MIDI keyboards at all since I had started making music. Like, who would ever thought the same MIDI keyboard that I never played would be something I play all the time now? And now because of that, I now can go to any other instrument, like a Lumatone keys, and be like, what would I do on this keyboard? I could be like, ooh, let me record that. Let me get that down. And so, it's all about looking at what you currently have. And if the gear starts speaking louder than what you're trying to say, then it's time to start taking away some pieces. Less is more in that regard.
Before we close, I want to bring up something, because you mentioned something interesting, that you were actually working, you weren't even in a full-time position, like a musician, in 2019.
Yeah.
Me personally, I'm not ashamed to say I have a job, right? I have a job. I view it as the bag to get the bag, which is what I actually really like. Yeah. I feel like a lot of people, like, they get discouraged of having to go through other means to do what they actually want to do. And they kind of feel as if like they're wasting their time. Like, oh, am I really doing it? What's your advice for people to kind of like even if you're doing something on the side for the time being, because you were a catering specialist, Uber Eats, etc. But that put you in a position to do what you want to do, because I personally believe financial security is creative freedom.
Yeah.
How did you realign that in terms of like working jobs that you didn't want to, and what's your advice to other people who might be in the same position?
I'll say it from my experience. When I was trying to find this lane of a creative freedom, intention was key. And all I remember my intention was, and I had to be very clear about it, I was like, what do you want to do in 5 years from now? And I was like, if I can make music and pay my bills with the music I make, not even just the music I make, but something from it.
Yeah.
Something about what I'm doing does have the potential to make money off of it. And I had to look at things like, especially like the music industry. The music industry is not really set up for people to get paid.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Who decided to look at a penny and split it?
Yeah.
Who splits a penny?
Yeah.
Who decided I'm gonna just take this thing and make it a decimal, like a point one? That's what you get. And we're gonna send that out every 4 times a year?
Man.
That's ridiculous.
That's absolutely ridiculous.
And so I realized the power lies within the ability that has been placed inside of you with your gift. Per se, my ability, which I've been talking about this with everybody, like, what's your musical superpower?
Yeah.
Or like, what's your ability? My ability, I learned, is to make things that don't make sense together. And when you look at producers and musicians, that's low-key what they do. Like, they have these great ideas, like, oh, this is cool. But it takes for someone to understand how that idea is looking and turn it into something bigger. And so I think in that regard, I say, look at everything that you possess. Everything that you do is value. When you provide a space, not for people to just, talk and be able to open up their creative ideas, but you're also providing a space for someone to possibly change the world through somebody else who's watching this. Somebody else might be watching you trying to find an answer, and it says it in a clear sentence. You're like, you helped me find an idea. That is what you should be doing. Dang, how did I do that? And you try and figure out, how can I do that more? And so my thing was, I learned how to make sounds within making beats. And that was the thing that did it for me. And so I think the ability is there for everybody. It's just knowing what you do, realizing what you do. And here's the craziest thing. People are always saying, like, your sound's ridiculous. Where do you get your sound back from? I'm just experimenting, man.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
It's a continuous process.
It's a really crazy process. And so it all comes from looking at your ability, looking at the value that you bring, and looking at, like, how can I at least just surround myself with that value?
Yeah.
And then I guess obeying that voice, or like God saying, like, yeah, go this direction. You'll start seeing, like, things are aligning. I'm meeting some people that are actually coexisting with what my purpose is, my intention is. And all I want to do is just make music. I'm surrounded by that, like, every day now. Like, I don't have an excuse to not be around people who don't create something dope. Like, even if I'm not creating, I'll be like, who's a homie I can hit up that's like making something crazy right now? And one of those good homies of mine are either The Count or Chuck Sutton. Crazy. Chuck Sutton reminds me of how I used to be when I was like young, before I like played keys and stuff. He likes to break down stuff. And what's cool is listening to other people's conversations, be like, oh, this is what you do? How can that opens up to not only we just having a discussion about musicians, but we're talking about art now.
Yeah.
I even see the art behind you on the poster in the back, and even this back here, it opens up a whole new world of things. Because it's not just talking about music anymore. We're talking about art.
Absolutely.
So now think about just not the musicians in the community, not just here, but worldwide, but artists who create crazy art. Like, there's people on Twitter I've seen that are making like
insane, bro.
And so it's like looking at that diaspora, whoever you're around, surround yourself with that value. And you know how they talk about, like, your 5 closest friends will indicate your future?
Yeah, you're the average of your 5 closest friends. Yeah.
That is the key. So
absolutely.
I say, if what you see is helping somebody either solve a problem or helping them get through something, continue in that, because it is commendable work by God, the universe, that you're helping somebody with what you are giving back to. It's a service. The whole universe is based off of service. I'm helping you, you're helping me. We're all receiving from somewhere, something at some point.
Causality and everything.
Yeah, and so if I think a lot of people can really get into like, I deserve this.
Yeah.
Listen, man, it could be totally different. I could have probably been like, if I didn't say yes to going on tour with Sango, I probably wouldn't be sitting here in this room. I'd probably still be trying to work a normal job. But like taking a risk and seeing where God leads you, you know, and just trusting that voice of like, you know what, I've been given a really special ability. Something is like making somebody cry that I did. I should continue on.
That's like enough.
That's enough. That's enough.
Man, on that note, bro, I can literally sit here and talk to you for like hours.
Same.
But we do have to close. My guy, thank you for coming, bro. I'm so glad this came together. Like, I wasn't supposed to be here.
Hey, alignment.
Alignment, bro. So thank you for coming, bro. Where can people find you at?
People can find me at on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all Kaelin Ellis, at Kaelin Ellis.
All right.
My YouTube doesn't say Kaelin Ellis, but if you search it up, you'll find it.
If you Google, you'll find it. All right, my guy. Cheers to that, bro.
My man.